You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
This is the story of two halftime shows that happened at the same time on Super Bowl Sunday 2026, and how one drew over 135 million viewers while the other barely cracked 6 million. February 8th, 2026, Bad Bunny made history performing the first Spanish-language Super Bowl halftime show at Levi's Stadium in California, and conservative organization Turning Point USA staged their own alternative featuring Kid Rock. What followed was a cultural collision that exposed deep divides in American politics, sparked accusations of lip-syncing, resurfaced troubling lyrics, and led to some of country music's biggest names publicly calling out Kid Rock as embarrassing. Let's break down exactly what happened, who said what, and why this became one of the most talked about moments of Super Bowl LX. Understanding how we got here means going back to when the NFL first announced Bad Bunny as the Super Bowl LX halftime performer. Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, known professionally as Bad Bunny, is a Puerto Rican artist with 90.5 million Spotify listeners compared to Kid Rock's 5.3 million. Bad Bunny ranks among the most popular artists on the planet, and his selection made him the first male solo Latin artist to headline a Super Bowl halftime show. Conservative backlash came immediately after the announcement. Many assumed Bad Bunny wasn't even an American citizen, ignoring the fact that Puerto Rico makes him a U.S. citizen by birth. President Donald Trump told Newsmax he'd never heard of the artist and called the selection absolutely ridiculous and crazy. October 2025 rolled around, just after the Bad Bunny announcement, and Turning Point USA declared they would create their own all-American halftime show as a counter-program. The show positioned itself as a patriotic alternative for real America. February 2nd, 2026 arrived, just 6 days before the Super Bowl, when they finally announced their headliner was Kid Rock. Timing matters here. The Grammy Awards happened on February 1st, 2026, where Bad Bunny made history winning Album of the Year for Debí Tirar Más Fotos, marking the first Spanish-language album ever to claim the Recording Academy's top prize. During his acceptance speech, before even thanking God, Bad Bunny said "Ice Out," a direct criticism of immigration and customs enforcement and the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. TPUSA announced Kid Rock, a longtime Trump supporter, as their headliner the very next day, and the battle lines were drawn. The controversy before the show even started. Things got messy for Turning Point USA before the show even happened. Within 24 hours of announcing Kid Rock as the family-friendly alternative to Bad Bunny, social media users dug up lyrics from a 2001 Kid Rock song called Cool Daddy Cool, recorded for the animated children's movie Osmosis Jones, which made the lyrics even more disturbing. The lyrics state, young ladies, I like 'em underage. Some say that's statutory, but I say it's mandatory." Pause on that for a moment. The artist, positioned as the wholesome family values alternative to Bad Bunny, had recorded a song about liking underage girls. The hypocrisy became immediate and undeniable once screenshots spread across X, Reddit, Instagram, and TikTok. The framing of Kid Rock as the appropriate choice completely collapsed before the show even aired. TPUSA never addressed the resurfaced lyrics Kid Rock remained the headliner, but the damage to their moral positioning was done. Production problems. The problems kept coming. 2 hours before the Super Bowl began, Turning Point USA posted on X that due to licensing restrictions, we are unable to stream the All-American halftime show on X. This mattered because the original plan centered on streaming via X, the platform owned by Elon Musk, a major Trump supporter, and the implication was that even Musk, with all his resources and supposed free speech absolutism, couldn't secure the licensing to make it work. They pivoted to YouTube along with streaming on the Daily Wire and various cable news networks, but the last-minute platform switch signaled disorganization. Viewers who finally tuned in found something that multiple critics described as surprisingly underwhelming. The show wasn't filmed in a stadium, arena, or even a club, but rather a small soundstage. Multiple reports noted that Turning Point couldn't even pack the audience space with people, leading to what Salon described as an anemic audience that appeared to mostly consist of paid TPUSA staff members. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote that the show had the same look and energy as if the musicians were performing on The Tonight Show, while Variety's Chris Willman said it felt like an old CMT special. These aren't compliments when you're positioning yourself as a legitimate alternative to the Super Bowl halftime show, one of the most watched musical performances of the year, and the production quality looked noticeably budget. The performances. The actual All-American halftime show ran for about 30 to 32 minutes, opening with a Jimi Hendrix-style electric guitar rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, followed by performances from Brantley Gilbert, Gabby Barrett, and Lee Brice. Lee Brice performed a new song called Country Nowadays that included lyrics about gender. I just want to be told, if I tell my own daughter that little boys ain't little girls, I'll be up a creek in hot water in this cancel-your-ass world. This moment represented the show's most overtly political content, aside from the tributes to Charlie Kirk. And that's when we need to talk about Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old co-founder of Turning Point USA and a close Trump ally. September 10, 2025, Kirk was assassinated while speaking at Utah Valley University, shot in the neck by a gunman positioned on a rooftop, approximately 142 yards away, with about 3,000 people in attendance. The suspect, Tyler Robinson, 22, surrendered to police the next day and currently awaits trial on aggravated murder charges, with prosecutors seeking the death penalty. The halftime show was dedicated to Kirk's memory, opening with tributes to him and ending with videos of Kirk with his family, his quotes, and the Bible verse Isaiah 6:8 that reads, "Here am I, send me." Lee Brice said during his performance that Charlie gave people microphones so they could say what's on their mind, and the emotional tributes clearly meant something to TPUSA's audience. But here's the thing, they also highlighted a darker reality, that Kirk's assassination was part of what authorities described as a period of deepening division and increasingly frequent violence in American politics. Now about Kid Rock's actual performance, despite being the headliner, he performed a grand total of 2 songs at the very end of the 30-minute show, and the first was Bawi Daba, which is where it gets embarrassing. Multiple viewers immediately noticed that Kid Rock's mouth movements didn't match up with the audio, with the vocals appearing to be approximately half a second to a full second ahead of or behind his lip movements. Social media exploded with accusations of lip syncing when one user wrote, "That was the worst lip sync I've ever seen. Wow, that was sad." While another said, "I zoomed in and centered Kid Rock's TPUSA alternative halftime performance, so you can see what a great job he did lip syncing." Even the conservative outlet Next News Network posted that Charlie Kirk would not have approved of Kid Rock's pre-recorded lip-sync Super Bowl performance. Some defenders suggested the sync issues could have been due to technical streaming problems, that pre-recorded packages don't always sync properly when streaming live on YouTube, and these things can happen. Whether it was intentional lip-syncing or technical failure, the optics were terrible for a show that was supposed to project authenticity and American values. Kid Rock's second and final song was an acoustic cover of Cody Johnson's "Till You Can't," performed under his real name Robert Ritchie, where he added lyrics urging viewers to give their lives to Jesus for a second chance. Megyn Kelly and some others found this performance stunningly powerful, but others felt it was too little, too late after the Bawit Daba disaster. Meanwhile, at the actual Super Bowl, while all this was happening, Bad Bunny put on what many called one of the greatest Super Bowl halftime performances in history. The 13-minute show celebrated Puerto Rican and Latin American culture with stage design that included sugarcane fields, a bodega, and electric poles depicting the rebuilding of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Bad Bunny performed almost entirely in Spanish, a first for the Super Bowl halftime show, with the only English coming from Lady Gaga, who appeared as a special guest to perform "Die with a Smile," while Ricky Martin also made a surprise appearance along with Karol G and Cardi B. Several stunning moments stood out. Bad Bunny officiated an actual wedding on stage, a real couple getting married live during the Super Bowl halftime show, and he handed one of the Grammy Awards he'd won just a week earlier to a young boy on stage, symbolically passing the torch to the next generation. At the start of the performance, he said in Spanish that his name is Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, and if today I'm here at the Super Bowl, it's because I never stopped believing in myself. The show concluded with Bad Bunny holding a football emblazoned with the words, "Together we are America," while behind him the Levi's Stadium Jumbotrons displayed, "The only thing more powerful than hate is love." He shouted "God bless America" and named countries throughout the Americas, while people behind him carried flags representing the diversity of the continents. Country singer Rissy Palmer captured what many felt about the performance, writing about how Bad Bunny once worked as a bagger at a grocery store before his music career, saying, "I can't think of anything more American than coming from being a bagger at a grocery store to performing at the Super Bowl halftime show." The numbers don't lie. Now let's talk about the viewership, because this is where the comparison becomes stark. Turning Point USA's All-American halftime show peaked at somewhere between 5 and 6.1 million concurrent viewers on YouTube, with different sources reporting slightly different numbers. The New York Times cited 6.1 million, while other trackers showed between 4.3 and 5.2 million throughout most of the show. And the YouTube stream has since accumulated over 20 million total views as of February 9th, 2026, though that includes everyone who watched it after the fact. 5 to 6 million concurrent viewers is actually a respectable number for an independent YouTube stream. More viewers than many cable news shows get, and nothing to sneeze at, to be fair. But then we have Bad Bunny's numbers. Preliminary estimates from NBC indicate that Bad Bunny's halftime show drew approximately 135.4 million viewers, which would make it the most watched Super Bowl halftime show in history, surpassing Kendrick Lamar's 153.5 million viewers from the previous year's Super Bowl. The official Nielsen numbers are expected to be released on February 10th, 2026 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So these remain preliminary, but multiple sources are reporting numbers in that range. Bad Bunny's show drew roughly 20 to 22 times more viewers than Kid Rock's alternative. And it wasn't just television viewership, as Apple Music reported that Bad Bunny's halftime show press conference generated over 63 million views across various content within the first 48 hours, making it the most watched Super Bowl halftime show press conference in history. The number of simultaneous Bad Bunny listeners on Apple Music spiked 7 times immediately after the performance, with his most streamed songs being DTMF, Bail Inolvidable, and TD Me Preguntó, and the biggest streaming coming from the United States, Mexico, Canada, Colombia, and Peru. The scale of the audience difference matters because Turning Point USA explicitly framed their show as what real America wanted, but the numbers told a different story. The backlash against Kid Rock. But perhaps the most damaging aspect for Kid Rock and Turning Point USA wasn't the viewership numbers. It was the reaction from within the country music community itself. Casey Musgraves, an 8-time Grammy winner and respected country artist, posted on X that, "Well, that made me feel more proudly American than anything Kid Rock has ever done," referring to Bad Bunny's performance. This wasn't some pop star from a different genre taking shots, but rather one of country music's most acclaimed artists, directly rejecting the idea that Kid Rock represented American values better than Bad Bunny. Then came Zach Bryan, one of the biggest names in country music right now, who shared an Instagram reel mockingly showing someone watching the Turning Point show on their phone while blocking out Bad Bunny's performance on TV with their hand. Bryan captioned it with what Kid Rock actually thinks is happening across America. Bryan didn't stop there. In Instagram stories that he later deleted, he wrote, "I don't care what side you're on, a bunch of adults throwing temper tantrums, and their own halftime show is embarrassing as hell, and the most cringe shit on the planet." The backlash against Bryan from MAGA supporters was apparently intense, which he later acknowledged by writing, "Bro, the irony and how upset a bunch of middle-aged douchebags are in my DMs this morning." Think about what's happening here, because country music artists, people from the genre that's supposed to be Kid Rock's home base, were openly saying that Bad Bunny's performance was more authentically American than Kid Rock's, and that's a stunning rejection. Trump's reaction and the Mar-a-Lago detail. President Trump's reaction was predictably negative, but there's a fascinating detail in how it played out. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had told reporters before the game that, "I think the president would much prefer a Kid Rock performance over Bad Bunny. I must say that." And the implication was clear that Trump would be watching the Turning Point show. but during and after Bad Bunny's performance, Trump posted a lengthy rant on Truth Social saying, "The Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible, one of the worst ever. It makes no sense. It is an affront to the greatness of America and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the USA and all over the world." He continued by saying this show is just a slap in the face to our country, which is setting new standards and records every single day. Including the best stock market and 401ks in history, there is nothing inspirational about this mess of a halftime show. Here's the kicker. Videos circulated on social media showing Bad Bunny's halftime show playing on the screens at Trump's Mar-a-Lago Super Bowl watch party. Not the Turning Point USA alternative, but the official NFL halftime show. Trump appears to have watched the very performance he claimed to be boycotting, just so he could criticize it in real time. Even Trump, the figurehead of the MAGA movement, couldn't resist watching Bad Bunny. The broader context. This entire situation needs to be understood within the broader political context of immigration enforcement in early 2026, where Bad Bunny had excluded all U.S. stops from his world tour specifically because he feared ICE raids at his concerts. This wasn't a hypothetical concern since the Trump administration had ramped up immigration enforcement significantly and Bad Bunny had been vocally critical of these policies. At the Grammys just a week before the Super Bowl, his "Ice Out" comment made headlines. And for Bad Bunny to then perform at the Super Bowl, the biggest American cultural event of the year, almost entirely in Spanish, celebrating Latin American culture and concluding with a message about love being more powerful than hate, was clearly a statement. The conservative reaction wasn't just about music or entertainment, but rather about who gets to define what American means. Bad Bunny's show celebrated the fact that America includes Puerto Rico, that millions of Americans speak Spanish, that Latin culture is American culture, while the Turning Point USA alternative was built on the premise that this view was wrong, that real America speaks English, looks a certain way, and prefers Kid Rock to Bad Bunny. The viewership numbers suggested that even among Americans who identify as conservative, Bad Bunny's vision was far more compelling. The Super Bowl game itself. We should briefly mention the actual football game, since that's theoretically what everyone was there for. The Seattle Seahawks defeated the New England Patriots 29-13 at Levi's Stadium, with Seattle's running back Kenneth Walker III named Super Bowl MVP after rushing for 135 yards on 27 carries. The Seahawks defense dominated by sacking Patriots quarterback Drake May 6 times and forcing 3 turnovers. Seattle captured their second Super Bowl championship in franchise history. But honestly, the halftime show controversy overshadowed much of the game discussion. What happened next? In the immediate aftermath, Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow and the current CEO of Turning Point USA, declared the alternative halftime show incredible and vowed to bring it back next year. While some conservative commentators praised the show, filling the YouTube comments with American flag emojis and God Bless America messages, Kid Rock himself used the attention to promote his studio recording of Till Ya Can't, posting on X that if you enjoyed our version of Till Ya Can't on the TPUSA All-American Halftime, our studio recording of it will be available to purchase or stream at midnight tonight, so from a business perspective, Kid Rock at least got some promotional value out of the appearance. But the dominant narrative in mainstream media and even within parts of conservative media was not kind. As the lip-syncing accusations, the resurfaced lyrics about underage girls, the sparse audience, the technical problems, the criticism from major country artists, and the massive viewership gap all combined to make the alternative halftime show look less like a legitimate counter-program and more like, as Zach Bryan put it, adults throwing temper tantrums. Conclusion. So what does all this tell us? At its core, this was a story about cultural power and who wields it in America today, where Turning Point USA believed they could offer a competing vision of American culture that would resonate with tens of millions of people. They positioned Kid Rock, a figure from the early 2000s whose cultural relevance has significantly faded, as the authentic American alternative to one of the most popular artists on the planet. The results were clear when Bad Bunny drew over 135 million viewers, while Kid Rock drew maybe 6 million. Bad Bunny made history while Kid Rock was accused of lip syncing. Bad Bunny unified audiences with a celebration of American diversity, while Kid Rock couldn't even unify the country music community, with major artists openly mocking his performance. Perhaps the most telling detail is that Trump himself appears to have watched Bad Bunny's show instead of Kid Rock's alternative, just so he'd have something to complain about. And when even the president who supposedly hates Bad Bunny can't stop watching him, it suggests who really has cultural power. The All-American halftime show was meant to demonstrate that conservative America rejected Bad Bunny and the diversity he represents, but instead it demonstrated that Kid Rock's vision of America, one that's smaller, more exclusive, and stuck in the past, simply doesn't have the audience it once did. Bad Bunny showed up with a message about how together we are America, and the only thing more powerful than hate is love, performing it almost entirely in Spanish to 135 million viewers. Kid Rock tried to offer an alternative and got called embarrassing as hell by one of country music's biggest stars. The Super Bowl halftime show battle of 2026 wasn't even close, and the embarrassment wasn't where Turning Point USA thought it would be.